Okay, good morning, everybody, and how are you doing? All righty. So I've been thinking about what I'm going to preach today for a long time. I was telling Pastor Lisa, listening to a lot of stuff and hearing a lot of things about it. So the title of my sermon is How Did We Get Here? So I think that's a big question for a lot of people out there. How did we get here? Why are we here? What all happened in the beginning? So there's so many different views out there on what happened from the beginning of time, and the views that are mostly pushed, the secular view, the Big Bang Theory, evolution, all this stuff. So really, in the end, there's two worldviews to have. There's the Bible view, that's God created everything, which our Bible says, and then there's man's view, that everything just happened by chance. So I think that a lot of people will believe the Bible, believe the virgin birth, miracles, angels, all this stuff, everything. But they get hung up in Genesis because they don't understand how it could happen. How could all this stuff have happened in Genesis? And the scientific world says that, they have all this proof of the way things happen, and then it's millions of years, things evolve. So that a lot of Christians will try and combine the two and say, well, maybe it wasn't 6 days, maybe it was 6,000 or 6 million years. Maybe God used evolution to get man to a point where he could finally discern good and evil, and there wasn't really an Adam and Eve. Or maybe there was a pre-Adamic earth that God had created, and there was dinosaurs and everything on that. And then God destroyed that when Satan fell, and then the earth that he made in the beginning is remade upon the one that was already there. So there's a lot of problems with that stuff, because if you look at the creation in the beginning, and if people were to say God used millions of years to get there, then he used millions of years of death and suffering to get to the point where there would be an Adam and Eve. And death entered through Adam's sin. So God said the creation was good and very good when he made it. If he used millions of years to get it to that point, then death would not have been the penalty for sin, because he would have used it to make the world that was there. That Jesus wouldn't have had to die, because Jesus took the penalty for sin, which was death. So you're putting death before Adam. So a lot of the evolutionary theory and everything that's out there, though, is pushed on everybody from a very young age. It's all you hear in schools, secular schools, millions of years. Little kids get books with dinosaurs in them that says, millions of years ago, dinosaurs walked the earth and all this other stuff, and then one thing changed it to another, and a lot of people just accept it as fact and that it's true, but the Bible says something different, so they try and reconcile the two. So many believers believe the Bible, but when it comes to creation, they think that science has proof of a story that's different than what the Bible tells. But you can't reconcile the Bible and evolution. If you believe the beginning and you believe the end, if you believe the end, you have to believe the beginning. If it's true at the end, it's true in the beginning, whether you understand it or not. So let's look at some of the things that are out there. So first of all, Genesis 1:1, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. He brought them from nothing. He created. God said, and then he saw. Genesis 1, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now, the creation week was 7 days, 7 actual 24-hour periods. So in Exodus 20:11, it's reiterated that it was 7 actual days. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea and the star, and all that is in them, and rested the 7th day. So it was 6 actual 24-hour periods. Why did God start with the earth that was formless and void? He was setting up a 7-day week. Everything we do is based on the 7-day week. He was setting up Sunday as the day of rest. 6 days he made everything. The 7th day he rested. He used that format to create everything day by day by day to set up the 7-day week that all comes into play throughout the Bible, the feasts, everything else, the years, times, seasons. People say, well, what about the stars? Because if God made a star, the star is so far away that it takes the light so far to get from the star to the earth. How could that have happened? You'd never see the stars. Even the light from the sun is 8 minutes old when it gets here. How did he do it? He made the light from the star to the earth when he made the star. That's how he did it, or else you'd never see it. The stars are for signs and seasons and days and years. When he made the star, he made the light from the star to the earth so you could see it and say, hey, those are for signs and seasons, days and years. It's really simple when you look at the way God did it or could do it, because to God, this whole thing we got going on here is just a snow globe with the earth in it and all this other stuff. In our minds, it's so big and huge and vast. If you look at some of the size of some of the stars that they found, the earth is like a pinprick on the size of just some of these celestial bodies. It would take 10,000 years at the speed of light to get from the closest galaxy to here. 10,000 years at the speed of light. So some of those questions are easily answered, when you realize that God is all powerful and, he can make anything he wants just like he did. He spoke it into existence. So the first thing is, where did everybody get off the track? Where did it all change? Because Adam, Eve, and everybody before the flood, they all knew, a lot of them knew each other. Joanne always makes fun of me because I go start reading the genealogies. Or, did you know Adam knew this guy? Because once you read past Adam in the Bible, you kind of think that's it for him. But he was still alive a long time. Adam had this guy and that guy, and then Adam had these kids, and he was still alive. Even Shem, the one of Noah's sons, was still alive during the time of Abraham. And it doesn't say anything about the other two sons or their wives. Where did they go? They lived still for 100 years after the flood. But you pass over them like once you read about them, they're gone. So where did it all change? All scientific disciplines were created from reading the Bible in the beginning. Dr. Carl Baugh, the Creation Evidence Museum. Then there's Ken Ham with the Creation Museum, the Ark Encounter, and other people that talk for them, that are scientists, that talk about creation and all this stuff. So until the late 1700s and early 1800s, most scientists believed the earth was only thousands of years old. So most scientists believe that based on what the Bible said. That's what they believed. But what changed? Why? Why would they change their... Did they find something in the ground, in the earth? Some new thing, some new evidence? No. Their thinking changed. They just started looking at it in a different way. Men like James Hutton and Charles Lyell changed their thinking away from the Bible to millions of years or long ages or all these other things. We don't need the Bible to explain this. We can explain it in many other ways. Charles Lyell wanted to free science from Moses. Got to stop looking at it through this biblical lens. So when you look at evidence, you interpret it based on your worldview. Charles Darwin had the theory of evolution, 1859. He made the theory of evolution, the book, The Origin of Species. He said, I feel like I killed somebody. He did. He took God out of the equation. Took the Lord out of it. So his thought was that there were these simple little cells, which really aren't simple if you know anything about a cell. And I don't know that much, but from what I've heard and what I've seen, they're pretty complex. They're certainly not simple. But his thing was the simple-celled organism. First of all, his thing was everything came from nothing in the Big Bang. It just started. And then it all coalesced and came together, and eventually stuff just started forming naturally by itself and created all these cells, and then the cells created more complex life. But he didn't know how complex a cell was. His thought was that the fossil record would eventually prove his theory. But did it? We'll find out. So God said his creation was very good. There was no sin and death. Oh. The pre-flood world was very different. It had, and this is according to Dr. Carl Baugh, he has the Creation Evidence Museum where he is trying to recreate. He has a big thing. It looks like a half of a tube with little windows in it, and he is trying to recreate pre-flood earthly conditions and grow some plants and animals in there and see what happens to them. So it had greater atmospheric pressure, higher oxygen and carbon dioxide levels, greater electromagnetic field, primary filtration of UV radiation that causes there would be no free radicals, uniform temperatures, and probably relatively constant humidity. So you have all that. Everything was perfect. I mean, the vegetation rates, the growth. I mean, it was crazy, I'm sure. There's in the fossil record, there's giant dinosaurs, other giant bugs. I just heard today there's like a seagull-sized dragonfly. Immediately, if I saw it, I'd pee my pants. Immediately, a dragonfly, the size of a seagull. Things could grow bigger, some of them, back at that day. Another thing you have to remember is man was made in the image of God and was perfect. Adam was perfect. His DNA was perfect. He was brilliant, and he lived really long, so his knowledge would just keep increasing. He was over 900 years old. He was the first guy. He had no mutations in his DNA or anything. What was his speed? What was his agility? What was his memory capacity, his mental capacity like? What did he bench press? I mean, that's just my personal thing that I want to know. But he was probably super strong. Things that early men did still cannot be understood by men today. Stonehenge, the pyramids, they still can't figure out how they did it. The pyramids are within 2% of the magnetic north. They made another building today, it's within 6%. They don't even know how they did it. But they were so much smarter and living so much longer back then that today they still can't figure out how they did a lot of the things they did. So this earth is very different than the pre-flood world. It was the flood that made major changes to the earth. Now before we go on about that, we're going to talk about what about the dinosaurs? Because this is, I think, a big hang up for a lot of people. What about the dinosaur? The word dinosaur was invented in 1841 by Sir Richard Owen, and it means terrible lizard. It was not used much until the 1900s. Dinosaurs used to be called dragons, from the Hebrew word tanid, serpent, dragon, or sea monster. So they used to call them dragons back in the day. He made the term dinosaur. That's the only term that we know. A 1946 dictionary defines the word dragon as a now rare, huge serpent, or a fabulous animal, generally a monstrous winged scaly serpent, lizard, or saurian, which is a reptile. So pre-flood dinosaurs were bigger. They lived longer. Some say reptiles grow their entire life. Pre-flood animals in a more perfect world could account for their size also. They were able to become bigger. They live longer. If everyone else was living 800-900 years, why would the animals be dying at a shorter time anyway in the pre-flood world? They probably lived longer as well. What does the Bible say about dinosaurs? All right, Job 40:15-24. In the New King James. Look now at the behemoth, which I made along with you. Now, people say this is a hippopotamus or an elephant, but he eats grass like an ox. See how his strength is in his hips, his power in his stomach muscles. His tail moves like a cedar. You ever seen an elephant's tail? Hippo's tail? Tiny, tiny, tiny little tail. Not like a cedar. You ever seen a brontosaurus tail or sauropod? It's like a cedar. The sinews of his thighs are tightly knit. Now listen, he sways his tail like a cedar. The tendons of his thighs are twisted and knit together like a rope. Why is that important? Dr. Carl Baugh at the Creation Evidence Museum has the leg of an apatosaur. That's a brontosaurus type. The leg muscles and tendons, if they were wrapped together around, in the leg bone, there's a protrusion that sticks out the side of it. If they were wrapped around the protrusion in the leg bone, it would enable the dinosaur to hold up his tail and his head at the same time. Look at his strength that's in his stomach muscles. Why would God put that in there? That the tendons of his thighs are twisted together like a rope. You have the protrusion in the leg. If they wrapped around there, it explains how they would hold up their tail and their head at the same exact time. And then it goes on to say his bones are like beams of bronze. You see how big some of the bones are of a lot of dinosaurs that are out there. His ribs are like bars of iron. He's the first of the ways of God. What about the Leviathan? Job 41. Can you draw out Leviathan with a hook? Can you fill his skin with harpoons or his head with fishing spears? Then he goes on to talk about his mighty power, his graceful proportions. You come down to here, and he talks about, he says, who can open the doors of his face with his terrible teeth all around? His rows of scales are his pride, shut up tightly as with a seal. One is so near the other that no air can come between them. They're joined to one another. They stick together, cannot be parted. Now listen to this. His sneezing flashed forth light. His eyes are like the eyelids of the morning. Out of his mouth go burning lights. Sparks of fire shoot out. Smoke goes out of his nostrils, as from a boiling pot and burning rushes. His breath kindles coals, and a flame goes out of his mouth. Strength dwells in his neck. Sorrow dances before him. Fire-breathing dragon. Why are there legends of fire-breathing dragons everywhere? Right here in the Bible. So I'm sure there obviously were some. Why is that so hard to believe? The bombardier beetle, this tiny little beetle, shoots liquid out of itself that's 200 degrees Fahrenheit to kill other animals in any direction. Could not have evolved because it needs every piece of its anatomy to live. So it couldn't have just all of a sudden developed the liquid and then the thing, because it would have exploded and died. Electric eels hit people with electricity. I mean, there's other animals that do other things out there. How about the ones that glow with bioluminescence? Why is it so hard to believe that one of them breathed fire? Why are there fire-breathing dragon legends? Right here, it all started because people knew that at one time. All right. What evidence is there that dinosaurs are not millions of years old? First of all, scientists have found soft tissues from dinosaurs with blood vessels and red blood cells still intact. They're mostly water, but they were still in there. They should not last for more than hundreds or at most thousands of years. Mary Schweitzer, who found this soft tissue, she's not a Christian, or not that I know of, said they need to rethink how they're preserved, not rethink the age. You start with the wrong worldview, you just, well, how are they this? She even says, I got goosebumps when I saw it. This is impossible. How could this be? Guess what? They're not as old as you think they are. But she doesn't come to that conclusion. She just says, hey, we just need to rethink how they're preserved. It's got to be some other chemical reaction that we don't know about. Dr. Carl Baugh has a dinosaur and man footprint together in the same fossil stone. The stone was scanned with a spiral CAT scan that proves it's not a fake by showing the dirt under the print is compressed. So there have been people that tried to fake it and chisel in a little man's footprint by a dinosaur's one, but if you make the real print, you step, the dirt underneath your impression gets compressed. You can't fake that. So when they scanned it, the dirt underneath is compressed, showing that it's a real footprint. Also, he points out this. He knows a lot more about this than me. I'm just reading what he said. Also, the second toe of the footprint, which sends the most neurological information to the brain, has a downward curve, indicating that a highly developed human left this track. This kind of track is unique to man. So it wasn't some other kind of half man, whatever, monkey, ape man evolving thing. Two well-known evolutionists, Richard Dawkins and Stephen Jay Gould, who said in a book, if you could find man and dinosaur footprints together, it would destroy evolution. They saw this print and said, impossible, and just walked away. That's it, impossible. And they left. There are over 600 fossil footprints in the Biloxi River with 90 human footprints at the same time. Uncontaminated dinosaur bones have been found with carbon-14 in them. Carbon-14, I think, is something you get when you eat, as you live. Carbon-14 builds up in your body, you die, it all goes out eventually. They found uncontaminated dinosaur bones that have been found with carbon-14 in them, which should not be there if the bones are millions of years old. Uncontaminated, 10 feet under the surface, because that's the first thing. Well, there's carbon-14 in this bone, not as old as you think it is, it's contaminated. They found uncontaminated bones that had it. It's even hard to get them tested, he said. All right, where'd they all go? Have any dinosaurs been documented to have been seen since the flood? St. George, said to have killed a dragon that looked like the dinosaur Baryonyx. Bones of that dinosaur are found in the area where he said he killed it. The city of Nurlik, France, was renamed in honor of the dragon slain there. It was described as bigger than an ox, with a long, sharp-pointed horns on its head, like a triceratops. Marco Polo lived in China around 1271 AD and said that the emperor raised dragons to pull his chariots in parades. Historians like Aristotle and Herodotus recorded seeing flying reptiles, and they said, winged serpents are said to fly from Arabia at the beginning of spring, making for Egypt. The serpents are like water snakes. Their wings are not feathered, but like the wings of a bat. A well-known old science book called the Historia Animalium claims that dragons were not extinct in the 1500s, but that they were small and rare, which makes sense. Post-flood world, worse conditions, things don't live as long or grow as big. Cave drawings all over the world show dinosaurs in them. The Ica stones from the Ica province in Peru have dinosaurs drawn on them, plus a lot of other things that are crazy. They say a lot of surgeries and this complex stuff that they knew how to do, but also dinosaurs on them. Indian cave drawings show dinosaurs. Indian pottery at the Creation Evidence Museum from 1200 AD has a dinosaur at the handle of a pitcher. Aboriginal drawings of a creature they call Yaru looks like a plesiosaur. Supposedly it ate one of their buddies, and their drawing has the plesiosaur is the one with the long neck and tail in the water with the big four flippers, and they're throwing like all their spears at it. You ate my buddy. Chinese pottery has dinosaurs. Central Asia has dinosaur pottery. Bolivian totems from 900 years ago show dinosaurs attacking a man. Now, these are the ones at the Creation Evidence Museum. On the totem, they have one of their gods eating one. So these things must have been, in some way, attacking them or tormenting them or whatever. So on the totem, though, the dinosaur has rosette patterns on its side, on its skin. Scientists now know, I think since the 1980s, that almost all dinosaurs had this pattern. They know that from finding fossilized skin of dinosaurs that has these rosette patterns on it. It looks like a flower. So on the totem, in the carving, they have the rosette patterns drawn in. How would they know that? Almost all dinosaurs have this pattern. They would have had to have seen the rosettes firsthand to know the dinosaur had them. They couldn't have just made it up. They didn't have any fossils. They didn't know anything about that. Also, the totem carving shows a man killing a dinosaur, a Spinosaurus, the one Jurassic Park 3 with the fin on it, that kind. In the lower neck, now in the totem, he's stabbing it in the lower neck, and the head and the tail are limp. From studying the bones, scientists believe dinosaurs had a small cluster of nerves in their lower neck to control their motor functions. The depiction confirms what scientists found or what they theorize now. So your heart has a tiny cluster of nerves on it. If you ever heard the Bible talk about the mind of the heart, have you ever heard any weird stories about people getting heart transplants and all of a sudden they start to like the stuff that the people who had the heart before liked? Weird, but true. So they believe that dinosaurs had a small cluster of nerves back here that was responsible for helping control their motor functions. If the guy stabbed it in the back of the neck where the cluster would have been, it would have had its tail and its head lying limp because it would have taken out the thing that controls its motor functions, something they would not have known. But what do the evolutionists say about it? Carl Sagan, an evolutionist, could not deny the drawings of dinosaurs. He can't deny it. The evidence is out there. So what do these guys say about it? What do they say? The Bible must be true? No. His explanation in a book was that, so when the theory is 65 million years ago an asteroid hit the Earth and killed all the dinosaurs, but not everything else, just them. So his thing is that the dinosaurs were so big and ferocious back in that day. okay, that the memories of the dinosaurs were passed from rodents that would eventually evolve into man over time. That's why the men remembered them and drew them on the cave things. That's why. That's his explanation. Carl Sagan. All right, any more recent sightings? Well, we know everybody knows about the Loch Ness Monster, which has been seen by many reputable people. There's another one. The Ogopogo Lake Monster was seen by Indians and settlers in 1947. 30 people are said to have seen it. Okay. The Lake Champlain Monster, called Champ, has been seen by many people back to the Indians. A woman, Sandy Mancy, took a picture of Champ that shows his head. The picture was proven not to be a fake. On February 22nd, 2006, ABC News obtained an exclusive video of something swimming just under the surface of the water that may have been Champ. It's two guys that are fishermen. You can go on and watch the video. They have and this is what really bothers me about. Can't anyone get a good picture, please? I really want one. But they are filming something. These guys are reputable guys. They're not just two guys. They fish on the lake all the time. And the one part of the video, you do see something on the side of the boat. Unfortunately, it's not that great. The Moores Beach Monster washed up in 1925. The renowned naturalist E.L. Wallace said he examined it and might be a plesiosaur. There's another one that I think a Japanese fishing boat pulled up. 4,000 pounds. They took pictures of it. It's got a long neck and it's got big flippers on it and everything, but what they did was took a little piece of it, they threw it back because they didn't want it. They had all these mackerel on the boat. I guess they didn't want to have something dead with the fish that they were going to sell, so he dropped it back in the ocean. But then somebody started to say that one, it could have been a basking shark that just decomposed. I don't know. Don't look no basking shark to me. You could look that one up. The African Congo swamp, like a walla, is 49,000 miles in size. It's 80% unexplored. The villagers that live near the swamp are shown pictures of an animal they see living there, which they readily identify as an apatosaur. That's another brontosaurus type. They say they see it there walking around. They call the apatosaur Mogo Mbembe, which they say lives in the swamp and is mostly nocturnal and very territorial. Now, interesting thing that I find about that is Job 40, 21, and 22. What does it say about the behemoth? He lies under the lotus trees in a convert of reeds and marsh. The lotus trees cover him with their shade, the willows by the brooks around him. So even the Bible talks about the behemoth living in a swamp and a marsh. These people say they see it near this huge marsh in the Congo. It's also been seen by U.S. explorers and African biologists and some officials from the Congo. What about pterodactyls? Where did they all go? Did you know they're called pterodactyls or predadactyls? They have said to have been seen in Alabama, Texas, California, South Carolina, and Washington State. February 26, 1976, school teachers driving to school saw a bird with a 15 to 20-foot wingspan that was, they thought it was a pterodactyl. That one there was also, that story was in a newspaper article there too, in Texas. In Papua New Guinea, it's said to have flying pterosaurs. They're called ropens. There was a pretty recent book written about the ropens of Papua New Guinea. Some say their stomachs light up with bioluminescent bacteria and that they're nocturnal. Now that would be awesome to see them flying around at night. Especially if their stomachs lit up like not like a dragonfly, I don't like them, but like a firefly. So dinosaurs would be rare now due to the harsher post-flood world from being hunted by men, because if they were rare, and like one guy said, even a lot of these dinosaur tales end up with the dinosaur getting killed. Hey, look at that. It's like getting a 12-point buck or more, They'd not be as big as pre-flood dinosaurs because now they also don't live as long, not as much food, and they live in a much harsher world. So could there still be some around? I certainly hope so. I'd love to see one. That'd be awesome. Now, would the evolutionists and people believe it? No. They just say, at the time that the asteroid hit, there was probably a small pocket of perfect gases that those dinosaurs ran into, and that's how they're still here or whatever. Why? Because you start at the wrong point. You just make up anything, even in light of the evidence that supports the Bible says. So now, we know that they were here. We know that they're still around, hopefully. The lady in Florida said she saw one run through her yard. You could watch that video too. It's a little grainy at night, but personally, I hope it was a tiny little dinosaur run through. Some of them are only the size of chickens. Chicken fried dinosaur. I would eat that. I don't know about you. I certainly would, especially if they put that Popeyes batter on it. Oh my Lord. 2-piece chicken dinosaur meal? Yes. Oh yeah. I really love Popeyes. Anyway. But maybe not a whole, maybe. We'll see. All right, so let's talk about Noah's Ark. So God creates the earth. Man, dinosaurs, everything's living on in this perfect world. Adam sins. Everything goes downhill from there. Man becomes really wicked and everything. God now decides he's going to destroy them all, and he says to Noah, go in the ark. What do you see about the ark mostly from the time you're a kid? You see the little tiny ark with the animal's head sticking out, and everybody's all happy on the ark. This was a worldwide judgment for sin. This was not a happy time. The ark was using the 20.4 inch cubit. The ark would be 510 feet long, 85 feet wide, and 51 feet high. Remember, the Bible says the ark had a second and third decks, 3 decks. It was huge. Look at the Ark Encounter, people standing by it. They say the biggest thing they get when people go there is how big it is. They can't believe how big the ark actually was. Who died, though? Genesis 6, 5, and 7. The Lord saw the wickedness of man was great on the earth, and that every intent of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. Sounds like today, but okay. And the Lord was sorry that he had made them on the earth, and he was grieved in his heart. So the Lord said, I will destroy man, whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, creeping thing, and birds of the air. For I'm sorry that I have made them. So he didn't have to kill the fish. They were already in the water. So anything that was on the land died. Genesis 6, 19 to 20. He says here, every living thing of all flesh you shall bring 2 of every sort into the ark, and keep them alive with you, a male and a female. The birds, the animals, and of every creeping thing on the earth after its kind, 2 of every kind will come into you. But that's 2 of every sort, 2 of every kind. 2 dogs, 2 bears, 2 giraffes, just 2, not 2 of all the varieties of those kinds, just 2 of those kinds. God sent that to him. So that's a lot less animals because there's millions of different varieties of all the animals on the earth today. Genesis 7, 21 to 23, after the flood happened, and all flesh died that moved on the earth, birds and cattle and beasts and every creeping thing that creeps on the earth, and every man. There wasn't a guy out there on a raft like the end of Titanic that somehow survived it and the waters receded and he was okay and he's some, pre-flood sinner. They all died. So he destroyed all living things which were on the face of the ground, both man, cattle, creeping thing, and bird of the air. They were destroyed from the earth. Only Noah and those who were with him in the ark remained alive. Look outside. I've been doing this since I've been thinking about this sermon. Just look at the vastness of anything around you and picture it all covered by water. This is a worldwide judgment. Now, how could all the animals fit on the ark? This is a big hang-up for a lot of people too, and especially the dinosaurs. Did you know there are only around 60 to 80 total kinds of dinosaurs? All the other ones are variations of them. Most dinosaurs are the size of a bison or a cow, but you don't really see those because everybody wants to see the really big ones. Or that's what you're really shown because those are more impressive. The biggest dinosaur egg is only as big as a football, so they all started off small. So if God brought Noah the young adults of the animals of all the different kinds on the earth, there'd be a max number. Now this is a creation, the Ark Encounter, they did actual numbers on this, 6,700. That's how many different animals would be on the ark. They said it would fit on 1 deck, easily. The number would easily fit on the ark with room for food, water, Noah and his family. He brought them all the babies, all the young adults, the tiny ones. They all started off really small. Some that I read more recently said they feel like dinosaurs had a big growth spurt when they reached adolescence, that they were small, and then all of a sudden they reached this big growth spurt or whatever. But either way, any animal today, you could hold a baby crocodile in your hand, but then he'll eat you in his mouth if he gets to be old enough and he's big enough. So he brought them all the little ones, 2 little kittens, 2 little whatever, they all easily fit. So Dr. Karl Bob points out he believes there was a lot of lightning during the flood as well on the earth, which does make sense, storm, lightning. Psalm 77, 16 to 18. The waters saw you, O God, and the waters saw you, they were afraid. The depths also trembled. The clouds poured out water. The sky sent out a sound. Your arrows also flashed about. The voice of your thunder was in the whirlwind. The lightnings lit up the world. The earth trembled and shook. God told Noah to pitch the ark from within and without. There would not have been pitch until after the flood, because that's where coal and everything came from after. So if he used the birch bark resin on some of the trees there, it would have grounded the ark to protect it from being struck by lightning. That's Dr. Karl Boss said that. There's a birch bark resin. So that's another thing that's taken care of. So the size and the shape of the ark was made perfect for them to float around in. It would have fit all the animals and everybody on site easily. If it got struck by lightning, it would have been grounded if he used that pitch, if that's the way it all went down. The flood was a major catastrophic event affecting the entire world. So what exactly happened? It just rained and rained and rained? No, it did more than that. In the 600th year of Noah's life, in the second month, the 17th day of the month, on that day, all the fountains of the great deep, deep sea or abyss, were broken up to cleave, break open, and the windows of heaven were open, and the rain was on the earth 40 days and 40 nights. So it wasn't just that canopy that the earth used to have in the beginning when God said he made the firmament and then separated it. That thing that filtered out all the free radicals came down, and then the earth was broken apart and fractured. All the water from the great deep came up, causing what? Volcanoes, tsunamis, earthquakes. This was terrible. It wasn't just like it started to rain and everybody was floating around. The flood was a worldwide event, not local, as some say. Now, that's another thing. People say, well, it was just Noah. Actually, it was this guy. I saw this on Discovery Channel once, and it was just a little area where he went. God says here, behold, I myself am bringing flood waters on the earth to destroy from under heaven all flesh, which is in the breath of life. Everything that is on the earth shall die. If it was local, not everything would have died. Right here, if the flood was local, Noah could have just left the area and went somewhere else. God would have just said, get out of here, like he told Lot, get out of the city. I'm destroying these cities. Go over there. If the flood was local and God used the rainbow to say he would never destroy the earth by flood again, he would have broken his promise, because there have been many local floods since Noah's day. So if the rainbow says, I'll never destroy the earth by a flood again, and then there's floods still, he broke his promise. But he didn't, because he would never destroy the whole earth with the flood again. What evidences are there of the flood? There are 300 or more flood legends in many cultures. This goes back to something I said a long time ago. Everybody knew the truth at the beginning. All people were one people, and they all had the same language till the Tower of Babel. So everybody knew the whole story. Everybody knew about the flood and everything else. Then God confused their speeches. Everybody went everywhere else. And then throughout all the years, they have their flood legends. But now you have all these other stories creep in as well. If a worldwide flood happened, you'd find billions of dead things buried around the world. This is exactly what we find. 70% of the continents are covered in fossil-bearing sedimentary rock that was laid down by water, whether it's the flood, as we believe, or other people give other explanations for it. So the flood started in the sea when the floor was broken up. Fossils are composed of 95% marine invertebrates and shellfish, 5% plants, and 1% vertebrates of all kinds. Everything broke up, the waters came down, the waters went up, everything got buried from under there, and then as it came onto the land, things got buried on the land as well. So more that are less mobile at the bottom of the sea would be first. The rock layers show the floodwaters covered the continents, bringing marine fossils on land. Up on Mount Everest, there's fossils, there's clams and stuff like that. Not even open, like they died and someone threw it away, ate that and threw it away up here. It was already dead, or it was still alive when it died. Fossils of fish and mammals are fossilized together. The water covered the land, depositing them at the same time, in the same place. The rock layers are widespread, rapidly deposited rock layers. The rock layers can be traced all the way across continents and even between continents. Redwall limestone in the Grand Canyon goes to Killarney, Ireland, with the same features and fossils in it. It also goes to England and the Himalayas. So if you go to the Grand Canyon, there's all the different layers that were laid down of all the different deposits. According to evolution, those are millions and billions of years laid down slowly over time. But it goes all the way across the world. Why? Because the flood happened, all the water came up, poof. It went here, it went there, it went everywhere. The chalk cliffs of England go to Northern Ireland, across Europe to Germany, the Netherlands, Poland, Israel, Egypt, Turkey, Kazakhstan, Midwest US, Alabama, Colorado, Texas, and Southwest Australia. Only the flood could have done it. All that dirt getting thrown down everywhere, all the way across. Couldn't have happened slowly over time. So let's talk about the fossil record. Everything's so old, millions and billions of years. First thing you got to point out, radiometric dating methods make assumptions and are not reliable. It could date the same rock and come up with two different dates for it. It's not a very reliable way of dating these things. Large animals need catastrophic events to bury them in mass numbers. There's a place called, there's dinosaur graveyards throughout the U.S. There's an 11-state logjam of dinosaurs that goes from the U.S. up into Canada. They all are pushed together. There's another place you can go to. They have it in a building. All these dinosaurs are dead, all inside this thing. Some of the bones are bent, like they were all in this big, hot liquid. Remember, the volcanoes, a lot of volcanism in the seas, pushing them up. Your bones are flexible, too. A lot of times your bone breaks because I saw a thing on this, too, on Discovery. Your bones are pretty amazing. If you slowly flex a bone like a femur, it will bend. But if you tighten up and get hit, your bone is probably going to break. Cool story is there was a guy that was picked up by a tornado. This is a true story I saw. I saw this a long time ago on Discovery. He was picked up and he got knocked out. And it took him a mile and dropped him down. He didn't have any broken bones because he was knocked out. So his bones and everything were all flexible. And he lived. So, marine life fossils are from small to big based on how the flood waters rose, not on how they evolved to get bigger and bigger and better. Animals were buried so fast that some of them were eating other animals or even giving birth. There's fossils of an animal, he has a fish going in its mouth. All of a sudden, bam, dead. Same thing with the one giving birth, which is kind of sad, but got to bring it up just to show that they were buried so fast. Flowers and delicate things would have had to be buried fast to make an intact fossil out of them. You see the petals of a flower, there's flower fossils. Had to be buried fast or it would have just eroded and died. You put a rose on your thing, eventually it all just dies and decomposes. There are fossilized trees standing up with layers around them. These layers should represent millions of years. So this destroys evolutionary theory. There's a fossilized tree right here, but there's all these layers. So if the tree was here and all the layers got laid down around the tree that managed to stand up, each layer should represent 500,000 years of all these little layers. So the tree slowly got fossilized from the bottom up over millions of years. It would never happen. Everything came down around it. And these fossils and things are out there, but what happens? People just make up different things. So here's another one. At the Creation Evidence Museum, there's an Icarian pine tree that got buried and then compressed. So the tree was round, everything came down on it and compressed it. It's like an oval shape now. And has one part of the tree is fossilized. One part of the tree is in like a midpoint. And one part of the tree still has fibers. How could you have one tree with 3 different states? You can't. It got buried and some of it got compressed so much that it fossilized. Some of it was in a midpoint. When they found it, they said you could still smell like the resin in it. Worm trails in the fossil record show they were moving upwards, trying to escape being buried. The trails they left behind would be in the rock layers now that were supposedly laid down before the worm even lived. The worm's going down. He's like, oh no, I'm getting buried. He goes to come up, but his trail should be in rock layers that are hundreds of thousands of years before that worm even evolved to be a worm. How could that be? Because when the flood laid it down, he tried to escape. Drastic death poses show that animals died quickly by being suffocated or possibly electrocuted if there was a lot of lightning. Dinosaur fossils that are supposed to be millions of years apart on the evolutionary time frame are found right next to each other. In that 11-state logjam of dinosaurs, there's one is 120 million years old, and there's another one that's 240 million years old, and somehow they're right next to each other. What do evolutionists say about that? Well, the plates shifted over the years and pushed that guy up. Okay. There are not many human fossils because there were only 2 humans that created at the start of humanity, so there'd be less of them than the animals. God created the animals. They were teeming with life. He created Adam and Eve. Plus, from those 2, they populated the earth, and everybody got wicked and was probably killing each other and all that. So there'd be a lot less people in general. Coal should take millions of years to form according to evolution, but the Argonne National Laboratory located in Lamont, Illinois, did a test, and by adding cellular material, acidic water next to clay, adding pressure and heat together, coal began to form in 3 weeks. Dr. Carl Baugh added the same materials, but also added a DC current because he said that the way coal is layered, it's positive and negative charges. And Psalm 77 says there was a lot of lightning. At that time, he did the same thing, added a DC current, and began to form coal in 3 hours. So did it take millions of years to form all these coal deposits? No, it didn't have to. High mountains were made higher during and after the flood. So you had all this thing, the plate tectonics, everything's spread apart now. You can put all the continents back together. They're ramming into each other. So if you read in the beginning when he talks about the water and the water level as it rose, and then it says it went up this many cubits over the mountains, that wouldn't cover the mountains today. So people are like, okay, well then it must have been just a local little flood. But no, the mountains weren't as high. They became as high during and after the flood. Big things were carved out. Now you have it's down lower. This mountain's up higher. One guy even said it's almost like Mount Ararat came up and caught the ark as it was going, being pushed together, building up, layers formed down and things. So they weren't as high as they were before then. As a result of a flood, there was an ice age that lasted hundreds of years. Volcanism caused warm oceans and cool skies from volcanic ash in the atmosphere. That would be a perfect condition for an ice age. Glaciers and everything are just compressed snow that keeps coming down on itself. So it would have been this huge ice age after they got off the ark too because of that. So what Mount St. Helens, when it blew up, Mount St. Helens, and it erupted, cooled the globe by 1/10 of a degree due to the volcanic ash it let in the atmosphere. That's one volcano, 1/10 of a degree. Imagine how many there were during the flood time and all that, and how much that would have cooled the earth down. Plus, the seas then would have been lower, one guy said by like 200 feet. So they would have land bridges, ice bridges. Animals could have still got everywhere to all the other continents after the flood for hundreds of years after. All right, here we go. Mount St. Helens. Let's talk a little bit more about that. When Mount St. Helens erupted, the blast force was 300 miles per hour with temperatures at 660 degrees Fahrenheit, which snapped 110-year-old trees like toothpicks. Icebergs in the area melted and formed badlands in days. Fine rock layers were produced, just like what they see now. Mud flows cut canyons 100 feet deep in soft sand and mud, complete with perpendicular side canyons, just like the Grand Canyon, but 40 times smaller, in hours. Mud flows in the following decades cut hundreds of feet into solid rock in just days of cutting time. Floating trees fell to the bottom of Spirit Lake and were buried in only a decade, and they look just like the floating trees that are in Yellowstone's fossil forest, which are also buried in volcanic layers. So they're also buried in volcanic layers there. The same thing happened after Mount Helens, just in a fraction of the time they say it should have happened. Engineers Canyon, which was formed by the Army Corps of Engineers pumping water out of Spirit Lake, was formed in 9 hours, and it looks like the Grand Canyon. So they did it for a couple days. In 9 hours, it formed this canyon. If you look at the canyon, it's like a tiny little one, and there's a little still stream going through it, just like the Colorado River still goes through the Grand Canyon. 9 hours it formed. Now, of course, you're going to go online, and people are going to be like, that's because the ground was softer and all this other stuff. And it's so much smaller. It's so much smaller because it was from people doing it. Imagine a worldwide cataclysmic flood with water and tsunamis rushing everywhere, what it would do. All right, what about the missing links? So another thing is the missing links in the fossil record, right? So missing links are drawn from very few bones to make complete drawing. And then somehow, after they make this complete drawing from a couple bones, like a leg bone and a couple skull bones and a tooth, they could tell you all about how these looked, how they lived, what they did, where they were, when they died. Their imagination is the biggest thing in evolution. They draw all these things from very few. Even evolutionists admit there's no missing links. The ones that Darwin thought he had later on when they found out more became disqualified. And don't forget, you wouldn't have to have missing links from just ape to man. You would have to have missing links in between every species of animal out there that they turn from this to that to this to that. Somehow they think now that Jurassic Park, dinosaurs turn into birds. Now they start drawing dinosaurs with feathers on them. They've never found one with feathers on them at all. Plus, this whole ape-man thing, your DNA, now they've mapped your DNA, which is so complex, it's incredible. Your DNA is so complex, I saw this recently, that it's like if I read a book from right to left, then I gave it to you, and you read the book from left to right, it would be an entirely different book. And then she reads it from up to down, it's an entirely different book. And Pastor Lisa reads it from bottom to top, and it's an entirely different book. There's 20% difference between your DNA and an ape's DNA. That's huge. They said it's huge. It's a huge difference between you and an ape. So, what does the fossil record show? The fossil record shows animals reproducing after their kind with no in-between species. It doesn't show all these missing links and one turning into another. There's a lot of fossils in the fossil record that are still alive to this day. The one that coelacanth fish, that I was so excited to see they were going to find this thing. It's in the fossil record, and there it was, and when they found it, it was just... I was like, whatever. And then in the same thing that I watched, the same documentary, where they finally found this living fossil, they started to say, but look at the movement of its fins. They're a little different. Could that have formed legs and everything else? There's a guy that's a dentist he's a creationist, and that he was a dentist, and he said he taught a class on it, and the first thing that he gave in college was how that fish scales form teeth. And then I guess he sees the ridiculousness of it now, but some students came up and started to challenge him on it with a lot of the creation evidence that's out there. He started to look into it and realized that he was wrong. So, human skulls have been found, and they would say that they're this and that missing link, but they had forensic people at the Creation Museum put muscles on them, skin on them. They look just like people. Neanderthal skeletons have had muscles and flesh put on them, and they look like people, not missing links. All these Neanderthals are out there, different people group, little different DNA. Their heads are a little bit bigger. They're short and stocky. They found that Neanderthals were very smart, burying their dead. They had art. They used needles and thread. They made a super glue to stick their spearheads onto their spears. They could not reproduce it in a lab without using modern methods. They still have no idea how they did it. They made this super glue, stuck the spearhead on the thing. This is Neanderthal things. Still couldn't even reproduce it today. Neanderthals were another people group in the world, with their DNA still being present in people today. Have 23andMe done. You could have some Neanderthal DNA in you. Everybody's wife is like, I knew it! Neanderthal. But Neanderthals weren't these these in-between people that were stupid and everything else. They were actually just other people. So while evidence supporting the theory of evolution is sorely and embarrassingly lacking, evidence supporting the biblical account of creation is increasing every day. So as believers, we have every right to feel confident in God's word. He did what he said that he did the way that he said that he did it. And you're not some kind of crazy person for saying it. It matters because you got to be able, it says, always be ready to give an answer to defend the faith. People forgot about the flood. The Bible says this, they willingly forgot that the earth was standing out of the water and in the water was destroyed, but the heavens and earth now are reserved for fire and destruction. So when people have questions about that, try and hang you up on all this science and stuff like that, you can have all the answers for them. But they don't even know. And even a lot of Christians out there are like, oh, well, Christian universities will teach the local flood and evolutionary things because they don't want to lose their credentials. They don't want to look foolish. So they'll give in on that and teach it as a compromise there. But you can't compromise the beginning because then you're going to compromise the rest of it. So, as believers, we have confidence that God did what he said the way that he did it. If we're asked, we know, and thank God for it. Have a good day.